Have you ever found yourself standing at the edge of a great emptiness, where the voices that once guided you have fallen silent, where the paths that others walk seem closed to you, and where the weight of solitude presses upon your shoulders like the heavens themselves? Perhaps you have looked around and seen that those who should stand beside you have turned away. Perhaps you have discovered that the world you trusted has become foreign, and you must now walk a road that no map can chart. In such moments, when the heart grows heavy and the spirit feels abandoned, many surrender to despair. They believe that without the approval of others, without companions to share their burdens, without the comfort of belonging, they cannot rise. They mistake isolation for defeat, silence for emptiness, and solitude for weakness. But what if this understanding is backwards? What if the very moment when you find yourself most alone is precisely when you can discover your greatest strength? The master Confucius understood this truth deeply. He knew that the person who learns to govern themselves in solitude, who cultivates virtue when no eye watches, who practices righteousness when no voice praises, becomes like a mountain that stands firm regardless of the storms that rage around it. Such a person does not depend on external validation to know their worth, does not require the presence of others to maintain their principles, and does not lose their way simply because the crowd has chosen a different direction. This is not about becoming cold or distant from the world. This is about discovering the unshakable foundation within yourself that makes all meaningful connection possible. Because when you know who you are in the depths of your own heart, when you have aligned your actions with the eternal principles that govern all things, when you have learned to find peace in your own company, you become someone who can offer genuine value to others rather than someone who merely seeks it from them. But here lies a truth that few are willing to face. The path to this inner strength cannot be walked while you remain dependent on the opinions, presence, or approval of others. As long as you need external voices to tell you who you are, you will remain like a leaf blown by every wind. As long as you require constant companionship to feel whole, you will never develop the deep roots that allow a tree to stand through seasons of drought and storm. The ancient sages spoke of this as the difference between the petty person and the noble person. The petty person is always looking outward, seeking validation, comparing themselves to others, measuring their worth by external standards. They cannot bear to be alone because, in solitude, they are forced to confront the emptiness where their true self should reside. The noble person, however, has learned to look inward first. They have cultivated their character not for applause, but for its own sake. They practice virtue, not because it brings reward, but because it aligns them with the natural order of things. When such a person finds themselves alone, they do not panic or despair. They see it as an opportunity. In the silence, they can hear the voice of wisdom that is usually drowned out by the noise of the world. In the solitude, they can examine their thoughts and actions without the distraction of others' expectations. In the stillness, they can align themselves with the deeper currents that move through all existence. Consider the farmer who tends his field. When the seasons change and other farmers abandon their plots, when the weather grows harsh and neighbors retreat to their homes, when the work becomes difficult and companions grow scarce, does the wise farmer abandon his cultivation? No. He understands that it is precisely in these challenging moments, when external support falls away, that the most important work is done. The roots grow deeper when they must search for water. The harvest becomes more precious when it is earned through solitary effort. This same principle governs the cultivation of character. When you are surrounded by others who share your values, who encourage your growth, who support your efforts, it is easy to maintain good habits and noble intentions. But when you stand alone, when no one is watching, when no reward seems forthcoming, That is when your true strength is both tested and developed. That is when you discover whether your virtue is genuine or merely performed for others' approval. The Master taught that the person of true wisdom does not change their conduct based on whether they are in the company of others or standing in complete solitude. Their righteousness does not depend on recognition. Their kindness does not require witnesses. Their integrity does not fluctuate with circumstances. They have become like the North Star, fixed in their position while all other lights move around them. But how does one begin this cultivation when the world seems to offer nothing but obstacles? How do you build strength when you feel weak, develop wisdom when you feel foolish, find direction when everything seems uncertain? The answer lies in understanding that these very challenges are not barriers to your growth, but the raw materials from which true strength is forged. Strength is forged. The ancient sages understood that adversity is not the enemy of greatness, but its most faithful teacher. When the Master walked the roads between kingdoms, often with no place to rest his head, often rejected by those who should have welcomed his wisdom, he discovered that external hardship has the power to awaken internal treasures that comfort and ease can never reveal. Think of the blacksmith's fire. The metal that becomes the finest sword must endure the hottest flames, must be struck repeatedly by the hammer, must be folded and shaped through processes that seem to destroy rather than create. Yet without this seeming violence, the hard metal remains weak, brittle, useful for nothing of lasting value. The wise person understands that their character is like this metal, and solitude is like the fire that purifies and strengthens what lies within. When you find yourself walking alone, when the familiar voices grow distant and the comfortable paths disappear beneath your feet, you are being invited into the forge of your own becoming. This is not punishment, but opportunity. This is not abandonment, but preparation. The universe has recognized in you the potential for something greater than what you have been, and it has arranged circumstances to help you discover this hidden strength. But here we must speak of a danger that awaits the solitary traveler. There is a false solitude that breeds bitterness, resentment, and pride. This is the solitude of one who turns away from the world because they have been wounded, who closes their heart because they fear further pain, who mistakes isolation for wisdom. Such a person becomes like a tree that grows in shadow, twisted and stunted, bearing no fruit that can nourish others. The true solitude that leads to strength is different. It is chosen not from fear, but from understanding. It is embraced not to escape responsibility, but to prepare oneself to fulfill it more completely. The person who enters this sacred aloneness does so not because they hate the world, but because they love it enough to become worthy of serving it well. Consider how the Master himself demonstrated this principle. When he withdrew to study the ancient texts, when he spent long hours in contemplation, when he practiced ritual and music in the quiet of his chamber, was he fleeing from human connection? No. He was preparing himself to be a better teacher, a wiser counselor, a more worthy friend. His solitude was not selfish, but generous, not empty, but full of purpose. This is the paradox that few understand. The person who can truly be alone is the one who becomes most valuable to others. They have learned to draw from the deep wells within themselves rather than constantly seeking to drink from shallow streams around them. They have discovered that the greatest gift they can offer to any relationship, any community, any endeavor, is a self that has been carefully cultivated and honestly examined. In your moments of solitude, practice the discipline of honest self-reflection. Ask yourself not whether others appreciate you, but whether you are living according to the principles that your deepest wisdom recognizes as true. Ask not whether you are popular, but whether you are becoming someone worthy of respect. Ask not whether life is treating you fairly, but whether you are responding to life's challenges with virtue and grace. The Master taught that the noble person seeks to perfect their virtue, while the petty person seeks to perfect their circumstances. When you are alone, you have the precious opportunity to work on what is truly within your control. You cannot command the loyalty of friends, but you can cultivate the qualities that make friendship possible. You cannot force others to recognize your worth, but you can develop the character that makes such recognition inevitable. There is a specific practice that the wise have always employed when walking the solitary path. Each morning, before the day's demands arise, they examine their intentions. Each evening, before sleep claims them, they review their actions. They ask themselves whether they have moved closer to or further from the person they aspire to become. They celebrate progress made and acknowledge mistakes without drowning in regret or puffing up with pride. This daily accounting becomes like a compass that keeps them oriented toward true north, regardless of the storms that may surround them. They develop an internal standard that does not shift with external circumstances, an inner voice that speaks with the authority of genuine wisdom rather than the whispers of fear or desire. When you have practiced this cultivation for some time, something remarkable begins to happen. You start to notice that your need for external validation diminishes not because you become indifferent to others, but because you have found a more reliable source of guidance and strength. You begin to act from principle rather than impulse, from wisdom rather than mere emotion, from love rather than need. And when this transformation takes root, you discover something that may surprise you. The very people who once seemed absent from your life begin to appear differently, not because they have changed, but because you have developed eyes that can see clearly. You begin to recognize who among your acquaintances possesses genuine virtue and who merely wears its appearance. You learn to distinguish between those who seek wisdom and those who only collect clever sayings. This discernment comes not from judgment, but from the clarity that arises when your own heart has been purified through disciplined cultivation. Like recognizes like. The person who has learned to be truthful with themselves can perceive truth in others. The one who has conquered their own small desires can appreciate those who live for something greater than immediate pleasure. But perhaps most importantly, you begin to understand that your period of solitude was never truly about being alone. It was about learning to be present with the eternal principles that move through all things. When you walk in harmony with righteousness, you are never isolated, for righteousness itself becomes your companion. When you align your actions with benevolence, kindness walks beside you even in the emptiest wilderness. Remember this truth as you face your own moments of solitude. What seems like abandonment is often preparation. What feels like isolation is frequently invitation. The Master showed us that those who learn to cultivate virtue in the quiet depths of their own hearts become like wellsprings that never run dry. They discover that true strength comes not from the approval of others, but from alignment with the way that governs all things. When you have learned to be whole within yourself, you become capable of genuine connection with others. Your solitude transforms from emptiness into fullness, and you emerge not bitter but grateful, not weakened but refined, ready to serve the world with the wisdom that only such sacred aloneness can teach.